Welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Jones, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program Policy Data and Evaluation Branch Chief within the Office of Community Services in the Administration for Children and Families. On behalf of the division, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on completing the FY24 Household Report long-form version. Today's webinar will focus on key items that needed to be completed in the FY24 Household Report form, which is due in OLDC on December 31st, 2024. The purpose of today's webinar are to review the key requirements for completing the long-form version of the report, to explain what changes have been made to the report for FY24, and to review the data you need to prepare for the report, and to provide a refresher on how to enter and submit the report in the OLDC system. The audience for today's webinars is states and territories that are required to submit the long-form version of the report. LIHEAP staff and contractors who assist with completing the report are also welcome. If you have any staff that's unable to attend and you want to review this training again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the AFC YouTube channel. Please note there will be another Household Report webinar later today at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. That webinar will cover the short form version, and it's intended for tribal grant recipients and a select smaller territory grant recipients. Today's webinar is being conducted by a prize, and in celebration of Halloween and that we're discussing the LIHEAP Household Report, I would like to introduce our unduplicated counts. A prize is a nonprofit research institute contracted with ACF to provide training and technical assistance for LIHEAP. A prize has worked with grant recipients on reviewing and verifying federal reports, and they've also provided one-on-one support for performance management reporting needs. We have two presenters from a prize today. Dan Bausch has worked on LIHEAP reporting and training for more than 10 years, and Melissa Torgerson is a former LIHEAP coordinator for the state of Oregon, and she regularly works on to assist grant recipients with in-depth technical assistance. We greatly appreciate you joining us today, and I will now, this training will be valuable, and I would like to now turn it over to Count Melissa. Please take it away.
This old vampire needs glasses, though, which kind of ruins the look. So today's webinar is 60 minutes long, and the slides that we have for the webinar today are available for download immediately, and they're under the handouts section of the GoToWebinar sidebar, which you should see on the side of your screen. As Heather mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be published on the ACF YouTube channel. And the handouts aren't just the slides. You're going to notice that we also have some key resources there that you can use and that we'll talk about throughout this webinar. Next slide, please. If you have questions, we're going to take them at the end, and we encourage you to go ahead and type them into the GoToWebinar question box. This is also in your sidebar, and you can see a little picture here of how to find it if you're not seeing it. We'll go ahead and review your questions and respond to them at the end of the webinar. Or if we don't have time for that, we will send them via email, we'll answer your questions via email, and that'll come from a prize. Next slide. So this is an outline, and we like to include these in our webinar because we know that you are probably going to print this out or even go back and look at it later. And so what this does is just gives you a nice little index to this webinar of key points we're going to be talking about and discussing. And so you can look at this as kind of a table of contents. We're not going to walk through it, but it's here in case you need it. And finally, the last slide in this section, we have several upcoming webinars on federal reporting. So today is obviously the household report, and these are the due dates for all of those reports. We have webinars that are being scheduled that we'll talk about later, but this is the one we're focused on today. And as Dan mentioned, we're doing the long form now, and then we'll talk this afternoon about the short form. And so with that, I think I'm going to kick off a poll, and this is what we're going to start by asking you. How prepared do you think your team is for completing the final FY 2024 household report long form, which is due in December? Are you not at all prepared? You haven't yet turned your attention to this. Are you a little prepared? You know it's coming, you're here today, but you really haven't started planning yet. You're mostly prepared, you're planning, and you're already working out some nuances. Or you're very prepared, you're already working on it and you understand what you're doing. All right. So it looks like many of you are falling in that little prepared or mostly prepared area. And so hopefully for all of you, we can get you at least up to the next bar or make you a little bit more familiar with what is going to be due at the end of December. Keep in mind that we're going to give you lots of resources to walk away with. And you're also welcome to call a prize after if you still have a lot of questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everybody. We're gonna shut our cameras off for the rest so you can see everything clearly on the slides. We wanted to just start with an overview of the household report and its background and history. The household report has been collected for most of the LIHEAP program's history, going back to the 1980s. And it's a really important report because it captures the key metrics of how many households are receiving LIHEAP assistance. It captures how many by each benefit type or category of assistance that you may provide. And it captures important demographic information on the poverty level of the households that are assisted, the presence of key vulnerable groups for the program, and now demographic information on race, ethnicity, and gender. The data in the household report doesn't just sit inside of OLDC. It does get used, it gets aggregated, and it gets put back and made publicly available for you, for your stakeholders, for researchers in the LIHEAP data warehouse and in the LIHEAP report to Congress. So just a quick statistic from the last household reports that you all submitted. State grant recipients assisted 5.94 million households with LIHEAP during federal fiscal year 2023. That's based on households that received a benefit for their energy costs, and that comes directly from the household report. All right, so we're going to talk about the 2024 household report and what's new with that report. So first, the action transmittal was published at the end of August for this report. That action transmittal talked about the report instructions, any differences from last year, and it included even Word document versions of the household report form. So those are available and you can still get them on the action transmittal page, or they're in the handouts here. So you can just download them from GoToWebinar. There was a preliminary report that was due in September on the 18th. That preliminary report is something that's intended to go along with your model plan submission. And that is submitted, of course, before the fiscal year is over. So the intention with that preliminary report is just to have estimated information on households assisted during 2024. Many of you in the past have submitted that with estimates based on what you did in the prior year, maybe with some adjustments based on what you know about the volume of assistance you provided. The final report is due at the end of December, and that report needs to have non-estimated actual data that is calculated from either from your data system or from your the information your local agency share with you. The report is in OLDC and has to be submitted in OLDC. There needs to be the person who has the proper credentials to certify it and submit it. And once that December 31st date arrives, you'll be contacted about the report if it has not been submitted. So we encourage you to keep that date in mind. Okay, so the good news is there's no changes to the report lines or the layout or how the report looks. It looks the same as last year. The form language has not had any changes. The requirements have not. There's just one change from last year. Last year, HHS first added new sections to the report to collect demographic data on race, ethnicity, gender, and also on whether households owned or rented. That information was required for some sections, and it was optional for other sections for 2023. At the time of last year's report, it was announced that the optional sections were going to become mandatory for the 2024 report. And we talked about that during the training last year. So as was planned, those sections that were optional related to race, ethnicity, and gender of household members and owning or renting housing tenure, those are now required for 2024, and it's expected that grant recipients will complete those sections. Now we're going to go into more detail about them and what you can do if you don't have complete information for everyone yet. You're working on getting it. We'll talk about how you can still complete these sections later in the webinar. Because we're starting November tomorrow, December's rapidly approaching, so we encourage you to be planning for that due date. And we've put a few resources in the handouts of this webinar to help you. One is the check before you submit document. If you haven't seen that, you should download that and give that to your staff who are working on the report, or keep it for yourself. It's just a helpful checklist. We also had a new resource we first provided last year. That's a spreadsheet in the handouts that's really useful for anyone who's doing the queries, or anybody who's trying to do the calculations for the report. It shows examples of how those calculations are done based on having your data in a spreadsheet or in a database. And last, we just want to point out that we're here to help you. We have staff who are very knowledge,able of the household report, and we can provide support to you if you have questions, if you have data related needs as well. Please reach out to us at Apprise. Our contact information is going to be at the end of the webinar. All right, now we're going to turn to key points for reporting, and I think it's back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Dan. All right, so we're going to talk about the kinds of data you need for each household assisted in order to complete this household report. First is the type of assistance provided. So this includes heating, cooling, weatherization. It also includes things like equipment repair and replacement. Next is going to be the type of funds used to give them that benefit. So this could be the household report breaks it up, as you'll see, by all funding types, CARES and ARPA. But really in your system, what you need to be doing is tracking the funding it came through so that you can then aggregate it as needed for the report. The next thing you'll want to collect is the poverty interval or level for each household. And of course, for most of you, you'll do that calculation as part of your reporting, but you'll need to have gross income level for each household that you're reporting on. Next is vulnerable household members. So for each household that you serve or each benefit that you'll give, you want to know if there is a member in the household that is 60 years of age or older, a member with a disability, and or a member with a young that's a young child under 6. Next, you'll need to know the demographics of the primary applicant. This includes race, ethnicity, and gender. And then this year, you're also going to want to know the demographics of all household members, and that includes race, ethnicity, and gender as well. And also now required for this year is the housing tenure of the primary applicant. And this is whether they own or rent their home. And we'll give you the exact language from the report a little bit later. So number 2, we're going to be talking about reporting counts of assisted households. So for the household report, you must report how many households received assistance. That's really the gist of this report. If your program issues supplemental benefits or can give the household multiple heating benefits, we're not asking you to report the total number of benefits given. We're instead asking you to use a household indicator or a household ID in your system to count up the total number of unique households that you have served. So for example, if you gave 10,000 different households heating assistance in the early winter, but then later you had funds remaining, so you went back and gave those same 10,000 households $100 each, you gave 20,000 benefits out, right? 10,000 regular and 10,000 supplemental, but you only served 10,000 households. In the household report, you would report those 10,000 households on the heating assistance line. Another way to really, we were saying that we were, no, you can go back. We were talking about being unduplicated counts, and this is really where we're going to start talking about it. If you can go to slide 17, please. Thanks. We require you to report this unduplicated count across different categories of assistance. So for example, we just talked about heating, but there are also 2 lines in the report where we're looking across multiple types of assistance as well. The bill payment assistance line asks you to report the count of households that received at least one benefit used to pay a share of the household's energy bill and utility deposits. So this could be heating or cooling. It does not include assistance for only weatherization, equipment assistance, or SNAP. We're talking about benefits where they got money to help pay their bill. We're also going to ask you about any type of assistance, and this is where we're looking for you to report the total count of households that received any LIHEAP assistance, and this includes bill payment, weatherization, and equipment. The only thing this excludes is the nominal SNAP assistance, sometimes called Heat and Eat. So when I learned about unduplicated counts, I learned about colors and dots. And so I'm going to explain this to you. Some of you may have a different way to really understand this, but hopefully this helps those of you who might be struggling a little bit. What we do is we pretend that we're going to assign each household a color. So you can see in the heating row, which is at the top, that we have household 1 who has been given a blue dot, household 2 has been given a green dot, household 3 has been given a red, and you'll see that household 1 is actually getting a second benefit. So there's two blue dots in that column. If we were counting just benefits, we would count all 4 dots because that's 4 benefits issued, but we're not. We're counting unique households, which means we're going to count the colors. Blue, green, red, 3 unique households got heating, and that's the count that we're going to be including in the heating line for our household report. You can see the same with cooling and weatherization. There are 2 colors there, so we're going to count the 2 colors in our report, 2 households each for cooling and weatherization. When we get down to any type of assistance, if we look across heating and cooling and weatherization, you can see that household 3, the red dot, was served actually 3 times, but we're only counting them once. We're just counting the color, not the number of dots. And so when we look across heating, cooling, and weatherization, we can see that there were 4 unique households served: blue, green, red, yellow. When we get to bill payment, it's going to be a little different because we're not counting weatherization there. So in that case, household number 4, the yellow dot, gets removed because they only received weatherization assistance. So this is kind of a handy way to think about unduplicated counts, and take a look at it a little bit closer after the webinar. And if you have questions, give us a call. We're also looking at unduplicated counts across vulnerable status. So a household with multiple members with the same vulnerability type should only be counted once under each column. And you might need to, at some point when you get to D, you might be looking across households that have multiple vulnerability types. So I think we give an example on the next slide. Maybe we don't. Yes, we do. Household A has an older member, age 60, and a member with a disability. And so they're going to be counted in the 60 plus column and the disability column. They're also going to be counted once in the any type of vulnerability because they fall under at least one of these categories. Household B has a member with a disability and a young child under 6. And so we're going to see them show up in the disability column, the young child under 6, and once again in the any type of vulnerability column because they meet at least one of those criteria. Household C has an older member age 60. They're going to be counted in the 60 column and again in the any type of vulnerability. And household D has no vulnerable members, so they're going to be no across the board. When we get to the any kind of LIHEAP status or any type of vulnerability, we're going to be looking at the yeses, not the number of yeses. So you might find, for example, this is what we said on the last slide, if household A has, say, 2 household members over the age of 60, we're not going to count 2 there. We're going to use the yes, no, so that we're really keeping it to an unduplicated count. And you're going to count 2 households in the older member age 60 column. When we get to the member with a disability, we have 2 yeses again. So we're going to look at putting 2 in for the total households to report. Young child under age 6, we have 1. So we're going to look at 1 there. And when we get to any type of vulnerability, we're going to look at the number of yeses. It's 3. Now you're going to notice if we were to add all the yeses up across the board, we'd actually get 5, right? But what we're doing is we're only counting them once in that any type of vulnerability column, which means we have 3 unique households. It's the same concept as the dots and colors. There may be multiple households within a category. There may be multiple households across categories, but we're counting each household once, both across and down in that any type of vulnerable category. Section 5 is the only, or I apologize, 4 is the only section that remains optional. And this asks for the count of households with young children in different age groups. And so what we're asking for is specifically is age 2 years and under or age 3 through 5 years. And so, for example, a household that has both a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old would be counted in both columns. Once again, this is an optional reporting section. If this is something that's important to your state and you need help figuring out how to get this out of your system, you can call a prize and we're happy to help you with this. And next we're going to talk about steps to take to submit the report.
Okay. So we're going to go through a few steps here. The first step is getting prepared by making sure you get the right data and that you're working with your IT staff or your staff that's knowledgeable of your data systems to be able to complete the report. Now, this report's due at the end of December, and that has been the case for several years. That's the normal due date. So here's an example schedule that you should have or should plan to have something similar to this each year, so you're able to complete the household report. This is going to vary depending on how your systems are set up, and if you're working with partners like weatherization department for LIHEAP weatherization, or if you have to work with your local community action agencies or your local sub-recipients to get the data from them because you don't have a central system, for example. The important thing is that you want to be ready by mid-December to be entering the report in OLDC, to be checking it over, making any corrections so you can submit by the end of the month. And if you need help understanding what to ask your partners or what kind of fields need to be extracted from your system, The handouts here should be helpful, but you can also reach out to check with us. Okay, step 2 is you may need to get data from program partners, and then you may also need to match data across different systems. So some of you may track your regular LIHEAP assistance separately from how crisis assistance is tracked or how LIHEAP weatherization is tracked. If households can receive more than one type of assistance, they can get regular assistance and crisis, or they can get a LIHEAP bill benefit and weatherization. You need a way to be able to match those households and to determine how many unique households were assisted by LIHEAP for that any type of LIHEAP assistance line that Melissa showed, and for those vulnerable household lines. So in this case, you don't want to just ask your weatherization department how many households were assisted. You want to ask them for household level data that includes the information like the IDs for the household or the addresses or the names, so that you're able to match them to your primary LIHEAP records and determine how many households got both types of assistance. This can be a challenge if you haven't done it before or it's new to you. So this is another item we just encourage you to reach out if you're needing help to do this. The third step is making sure you can get into OLDC. So this is the Grant Solutions online data collection system. You do need credentials to be able to access it and to submit reports. And we know you're not in there using the system all the time, so sometimes you may need a refresher on how to navigate where you want to go or how to find what you're looking for. We encourage you to try to go in earlier than the due date, make sure you can get there. Your preliminary report was submitted in OLDC already, so what you'll be doing is navigating again to that same report and seeing what needs to be updated to finalize the report with non-estimated data. If you're having trouble getting into OLDC, your credentials are expired, or you're not sure where to go, the two resources to use are the OLDC help desk if you're getting some kind of a error logging in, or if you don't know where to go or you need to add a new person, your OCS program specialist. Bottom of this slide is what you'll be looking for to navigate to this report. Fourth step is we strongly encourage you to look back at your report from last year for 2023 and to look back at any emails that were sent to you about that report. We review the reports each year and do a series of checks to verify that everything in the report is complete and that there's no questions based on the information. If there are questions, we email you about them. And so sometimes you may have the same issue or the same questions occur over time. So we encourage you to look back at those emails so that you're able to just see, oh, this issue came up last year, or this question. Now when you submit it this year, you can take the same step again if you need to add a note, for example. So if you don't have access to those emails, you're new to the program, you can also contact us and we can share that with you. All right, we're going to focus now on the demographic items that were added to the household report last year and just review those. So first, as background, these new sections were added to the household report last year, and they're sections 5 to 9 of the report. They were added by HHS to help better understand the composition of households that are assisted by LIHEAP. As we mentioned earlier, some sections 8 and 9, were optional last year, and those sections are now required this year, so you're expected to fill out information in them. But we want you to know that we understand, and HHS understands, that there's variation in how you might be collecting this information and the extent of your recipients who are providing the information. And there's different ways that you may be collecting race information or ethnicity information than the categories that have been used in the household report. So throughout these sections, there's an other category to assist with that. There's also an unknown, not reported category for households that didn't share that information, for information you don't have available yet because you're working on system updates or intake form updates. So we want you to know that even if you are missing some of the information or there's differences from these categories, there's still fields to help you to be able to report. All right, so the first item we wanted to go over was section 5 of the report. This is the owner-renter status section. You can see it on the bottom of this slide. Here, you're reporting information that normally comes from your applications. There are different fields, and we understand that you may have information that isn't as granular as this, or maybe is even more granular. So again, if there's a question about where to put certain information on these lines, we encourage you to reach out to us and your program specialist. You see the other and unknown line we talked about earlier. We want for this section for you only to report each household once. So if a household got heating and got cooling assistance, for example, you would not want to report them twice. The idea is that you want to count each household only once, just like you do for any type of LIHEAP assistance. Now, there are instances where the records don't match, right? The household might have received heating assistance and put that they owned, and then when they received cooling assistance, maybe they didn't answer that question, maybe they changed it to be rent. And so we recommend you have a procedure for addressing that. We usually recommend keeping the earliest record so that you have one consistent approach. If a household's heating or their electric bill are included in rent, you should count them on this third line, rent with utilities in rental fee. So that's section 5, owner rent. This was optional last year and is now required for this year. The next section is section 6, and this is the race and ethnicity for the primary applicant. For section A, ethnicity, you are reporting using these categories for the primary applicant. This again means that you want to be focused on counting each household only once and counting just the primary applicant, not every person in the household. If the information wasn't reported or you don't have the information, there's this unknown, not reported category. And for all of these sections, you'll see at the bottom, there's a total field that auto calculates. And so you don't have to type anything there. It'll add up the total as you enter information in the other lines. Section 6 is also for the primary applicant. And now we're going to part B, the race of the primary applicant. Here, the goal is to report using these different categories. And again, to report just for a primary applicant. If a person has more than one applicable category, item 6 is what's intended to be used for reporting for that household. That's a multi-race option. If the information isn't available, you again have the unknown, not reported column. And if you're struggling with how to match things to the categories, or you have any questions, we did review these last year in the 2023 reports, And we encourage you to look at those emails again, because we may have had some discussion about this section last year since it was new. Section 7 is the number of assisted applicants by gender. This again is focused on the primary applicant for each household. So the goal is to count each household only once. There are 4 different categories here to use. You may find that there are some challenges in being able to report here correctly, and we want to encourage you again, if there's some kind of a question or you're wondering why the numbers look the way they do, to start with looking at what you had last year. And if you're seeing a large difference, that may indicate there's an issue to be resolved, and we're happy to help with that. But this was reported last year, so this is not a new item, but we're about to go into the new items next. Okay, this is section 8, and this is a section that was optional last year and is now required. This looks exactly the same as the sections we just went over. The only difference is that you're being asked to report for all household members. So much of the household report is focused on household counts, but section 8 and section 9 are actually individual counts or people counts. The purpose here is to get a sense of the households that are being assisted by LIHEAP, what their demographic composition looks like. And so for this section, you should have numbers that add up to be substantially higher than the total number of households you report receiving assistance. How you compile the information and report it in this section is going to depend a little bit on your data systems. Some of you may already track information on individuals and have a table with all individuals that you kind of simply add up for each category and report. Others of you may have information mainly at the household level, and you'll need to kind of start with the household and then move down to the members. But one really important thing we want to point out and acknowledge is, households don't always stay the same throughout the fiscal year. And there may be some members you're counting more than once when a household splits into 2 households due to somebody moving, or due to a change in marital status, things like that. So we encourage you to use the best approach you can to be counting all household members, and that it is acceptable that some members may be counted multiple times because of changes in households. Section 9 is the other optional section from last year that's now required. This also matches the earlier section on gender. The only difference is you're being asked to report on all household members. That should include adults as well as information you collect on children. Now, some of you may not be fully collecting this yet, and you're in the process of maybe making changes to your application to be able to do this. We encourage you, if that's the case, to, of course, still report in this section, but to also include notes in the report that mention where you are in the process and any challenges you're facing with being able to collect or report this. And we want to also be very clear that none of this demographic information is something that your applicants have to report to receive assistance. This is all information that they can report, but of course they can choose not to report. It doesn't impact their assistance, but for the report, you're being asked to report what information is available and what has been reported to you as part of the household report. All right, I think now we're going to turn to some final reminders before we take questions, and we'll hand it back over to Melissa.
Thanks, Dan. So a big key reminder, this final household report is due in OLDC on December 31st of this year. And this report must contain non-estimated data from your tracking systems and your program records. So the one that was due in September could include estimates. This one is your final. It needs to be at, actual data. If you need technical assistance in completing the report, we've mentioned multiple times to reach out to us, and we mean it. Do it as soon as possible. Chances are we've helped another state or tribe or territory with the same issues that you're looking at, and may have some pretty straightforward solutions for you. So don't hesitate. Please reach out and call us. The good news highlighted here is that there are no changes to the report lines or layout. The only change we do have is that there are new sections to collect demographic data. Last year, as you know, data on the primary applicant was required, but household members and the owner-renter tenure column was not there, but this year it is included. And we have announced, HHS has announced prior to even the FY23 report that the optional sections would be mandatory, and we did review it during some training last year. So many of you have had some time to get prepared, but as Dan mentioned, those of you who may be kind of midway through or still ramping up, if you need assistance, call us, and make sure that you're making notes in the report about kind of where you're at if you feel like your data is not quite there. Next slide, please. So there are some OLDC resources, as those of you who have been around a while know that this is a big step or part of the process. Getting it, getting your data together is one thing, but then putting it into OLDC is a whole other ballgame. And so to complete this reporting requirement, you have to submit your form in the OLDC system. We've included here the login information for that. And if you need assistance getting logged in or with a password, or maybe you've never used it before, we've included a number and a email here for you to contact and reach out to. You can also reach out to us if you're having problems getting through to Grant Solutions, and we'll try and help out there. When you do go into OLDC, if you have permission to certify and submit, anyone with a role of grant administrator should be able to do this. You'll need to first go in and enter your report and then save it. And then when you're ready, you'll validate it. And once the form is valid and correct, you'll hit certify and submit. So this is a multi-step process. And you'll want to make sure that you're not leaving it until 5 minutes to midnight to do. It'll take a few minutes, so leave yourself some time to get this done. We do have warning and error messages that may pop up during your validation process. And so a warning message is something that you're going to get if your data could be correct, but maybe we want you to confirm it. So this might be something that's, for example, way off from what you reported last year, or we think, there's something about it that makes it look like it might be a typo. And what we usually say is that if you get a warning and you confirm that the data is right, we ask that you put a note in the note section so that when apprised does a secondary review, they can explain anything that they're also trying to validate. A fatal error message is a little bit different. This is inconsistent or arithmetically impossible numbers that you must correct before you can submit. And so usually this ends up happening when you've accidentally put a wrong number in, or your numbers are way off. If either a warning or an error message appears and you either don't understand it or you're not able to resolve it, please reach out to us for assistance, and we'll guide you through what you need to enter in order to move past that step in OLDC. Some outdated validation checks that we've had have been triggered in the past, and so if you get an incorrect check, one that's obviously incorrect to you, please notify us if you can, so that we can fix that so other folks don't have to go through the same thing. Next slide. Once you do submit your report, the process goes like this. Apprise will first email you to alert you to any issues or questions based on their review. You should provide a response as soon as possible and make any corrections to the report that are suggested. And this might include a phone call or some back and forth if you have questions. And then when the report is confirmed to be complete by Apprise, your liaison will accept it in OLDC. If after it's already been accepted, you identify a correction or a change or a revision, you will need to submit a formal revision in OLDC, and there is a process for that. Some final reminders here. We've got some resources here that are really useful as you're going through and doing your reporting. This includes the instructions, the poverty guidelines for those of you who are calculating based on gross income coming right out of your system. This gives you a nice tool for how to calculate those poverty intervals, state median income estimates, and then this check before you submit document, which is really awesome in that it basically walks you through some of the same validations that both OLDC and Apprise use. So if your IT folks or someone else is putting together your report, both they can use this as kind of a double check document, but you can also use this before you submit it to check their work to make sure that there's nothing that is clearly out of the ordinary or unexpected. And then we have a whole website that is on required report, or a whole web page that's on required reports on the performance management website. And the link is here. And you'll just want to select the household report dropdown, and anything you need on the household report, including all of these things, will be under that dropdown. We have some upcoming webinars. November 14th, we'll be talking about the carryover and reallotment report. We'll be talking about the performance data form module 1, which is the grantee survey, on November 19th. The performance data form module 2, which is the performance measures, will be on December 10th. And then a completing quarterly reports webinar will be on December 17th. We always like to start reminding people now, the performance measures report is due in January. And as you know, a big piece of that for most of you is going out to vendors and requesting data. And so we always kind of take every opportunity we can to encourage you to be requesting and collecting energy data right now from your vendors so that you can get it back, compile it, and turn that report in on time. And just as a reminder, we're expecting you each to collect data or target your data collection to the top 5 electric companies, top 5 natural gas, top 10 propane, and top 10 fuel oil. And so this is really about those vendors with the most clients. And you should be doing that starting right about now. November is the perfect time frame to be making those requests to your vendors and getting them back to review and compile in time to finish the report. If you need assistance, once again, we have lots of resources and we are happy to talk with you one-on-one to help. We've listed contact information for both Dan and I, as well as other key Apprise team members. We've also listed your federal liaisons, as well as your other peers in the network who may also be able to help you through pieces of this as you're moving through your federal reporting cycle. We're gonna kind of wrap up here a little bit with a quick poll. How helpful was this webinar in understanding what is needed to complete the FY24 Household Report long form? Was it not at all helpful? Was it not too helpful? Was it somewhat helpful or very helpful? And Nicholas, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Melissa. I'll give it another minute before we close the poll. All right.
We are going to take questions in a minute. We see some questions in the chat, so we'll get there.
Are you able to see the results?
Yep, so we see that many of you found it to be somewhat helpful or very helpful, and that is really awesome. If for those of you who found it somewhat helpful, but you're still maybe a little unclear about certain areas, if you take one thing away from this, it's that we're here to help. And so I encourage you to call any of us, and we will walk you through and answer your questions as best we can. And I think we'll take questions now.
Yes, so we had a few questions regarding the preliminary report. Where can I find that? Where should it be submitted? Should it be validated, certified, and submitted, or is that only for the final report?
Yeah, good question. So the preliminary report, we don't want anyone to get to get nervous about it. Basically, the preliminary report is something that is requested each year at about the time you're submitting the model plan, and it is the same form in OLDC that you're going to use in December for the final report. You navigate to the same place. All that is asked for the preliminary report is for estimates that you can base on your activity last year. You can base on preliminary data that you have to fill into the report. And that estimated data is not published. It's not reported anywhere. It's not going to be made publicly available or anything like that. So it's just estimated non-final data. If you're not sure if your state submitted that report, we encourage you to look to OLDC or to reach out to your program specialist about it. The report's also not not reviewed in detail like the final report is, so you wouldn't have received emails asking you questions, for example. The final report that's due in September, what you'll be doing is going back in OLDC, going back to the same report and editing it to put in final data. And then that final report will be checked and reviewed. And once it's finalized, that's the information that gets reported and made available. That's your final record of your activity during 2024. The preliminary report was not something that was required last year because there was a kind of a delay in the process with the household report, but it has been due other years in the past, and it should be due each year going forward. So if you have questions, look at the action transmittal, check in OLDC, and just reach out to your program specialist about it.
Thanks, Dan. And just want to remind everyone that the final data is due December 31st. So our next question is regarding Section 5, household owner renter status, which is now required for FY 2024. How do I count a household whose heat is included in rent?
Okay, heat, can you go back to that slide with that shows this section? Thank you. Okay, there's the section on the bottom of this slide. So you can see there's three main categories: own, rent with utilities billed separately, rent with utilities in rental fee. If a household has their heating or electricity bill are included in their rent, you want to count them on that third line. It's either or both are included in rent, you'll count them on that third line. Now, there are instances where maybe you don't track it that same way or collect it exactly that way. And we saw some of that in the reports last year. We ask that you just include a note about that to explain that, so we're aware of that. So line 2 is for renters that have both their heat and their electric separate from their rent. Line 3 is if they have either heat or electric in rent, they should be included on line 3. And other, line 4 is for unique situations where a household it doesn't own where they live, but they're also not paying rent.
Thank you, Dan.
Other questions?
So we received a question, can we refer to our state plan with regards to explaining why we do not capture renter status, utility included?
Yes. Yeah, if you have information in your state plan that you think is helpful for explaining something in the household report, there's a notes section at the end of the household report. We encourage you to just reference that. And if we ask you a question and the question about your report, you think the answer relates to something in your state plan, you can also just tell us, and that will answer the question.
How do we report household member demographics if we're missing information for some members?
Melissa, do you want to answer? I don't want to monopolize all the talking.
I will, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong. How's that? So if you go back to the race ethnicity, what you're going to see is, remember Dan talked about counting individuals. So if you have household, if you're looking at a household ID or a household and you see that there are 5 members, including the applicant, by the way, but you're missing 2 of the children, or one of the adults didn't report, or something like that, you're gonna count them like you would individuals, and you're gonna use that unknown and not reported section to include those folks for whom you don't have information. So you might be relying, Dan said this is going to be different in every system. You might be relying on that household size column or field in your data system to help you identify those that you don't have information for. So that's one way that you could do that, but you would just put them in the unknown or not reported line. Is that what you would recommend, Dan, or something different?
Nope, that's right. So if you have a person in the home and you don't have this information, you basically want to count up all the people who are missing the information, and that total number goes on, line 3 here for unknown not reported, or line 8 on the bottom of the table for unknown not reported.
And Melissa, looks like you addressed another question, which was, should we include the primary applicant in these household member sections?
That's my understanding. Dan, do you want to confirm that?
Yep, that's correct. So you want to include everyone. So that means this is section 8 here. That means the earlier section for just the primary applicant should always be, those numbers should always be lower than what's in this section. You're going to count, if a household has 2 people, the earlier section for race and ethnicity will have that 1 person from that household counted. And then this section will have both the primary applicant and the other person, so 2 counted. So you do want to include the primary applicant in both of the sections.
I do want to say, so I help some states with their reporting, and this is a tricky count, given that we've never done it before, and there are lots of interesting variables like split custody, and as Dan mentioned, people changing households, and some of you collect household IDs, but others of you don't, and some of you collect individual IDs, and some of you don't. So we expect that there will be questions, as this is the first year it's required, and we really encourage you to send them our way, not just so that we can help, but also so that we can maybe put together some guidance moving forward for all states, tribes, and territories who may have to report this. It will help them.
Well, it looks like we're about at time, so we want to thank you for your time coming today, and remind you the recording will be available. It will be available in November on the training page. And we have another webinar coming up on the performance data forum. We have one for the grantee survey in November, and then we'll have one later on for the Module 2 performance measures. So we hope to see you at those webinars and encourage you to register. Anything else, Melissa?
No, just thank you for joining us today.
Yep, thank you. Hope you have a good rest of your day.